Welcome to the Seasons Podcast, where we explore the intersection of creativity, growth, and balance through life's ever-changing seasons. I'm your host, Autumn Hashi, interior designer turned mindset coach and creative mentor. Here, we speak with inspiring leaders, spirited entrepreneurs, and everyday visionaries about wellness, mindset, creativity, and intentional living, offering insights and tools to help you step boldly into your next season of self. Welcome back to the Seasons Podcast. Today, we're excited to have Matty Christopherson with us, a lifelong athlete, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Opscotch, a modern health company revolutionizing the way we approach wellness optimization. Recently, Matty pushed the limits of mind and body by running 125 kilometers from Vancouver to Whistler, raising over $130,000 for a dear friend and two-time Olympian fighting stage 4 cancer. Prepare to be inspired by Matty's story of courage, commitment, and the relentless pursuit of personal growth. Welcome to the show, Matty. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Autumn.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
This is cool.
this is going to be fun.
You just got in from New York.
Yeah, it was a quick trip.
Yeah.
Love that city. The energy was, always 11 out of 10.
What were you there for?
There was a couple wellness shows and just kind of taking that time after this post run. Feed the soul and maybe a little bit of retail therapy. There was a wellness show, like I said, and had the opportunity to get out there and do a run. First run after Project 125. So clocked 10 miles and over the Brooklyn Bridge, which was amazing.
Did you have PTSD?
You know what? The legs did afterwards. I didn't realize we were going to do 10 miles. And when I headed back to the hotel, I felt it. I'm still struggling with a little bit of the energy levels, even though it's been 5 weeks since the 125 kilometer run. But no, it was amazing.
Well, you were running with Casey Neistat, so.
Yeah, it was an epic group, and feel very grateful to be invited along. And good way to see the city.
That's pretty cool. For anyone who doesn't know Casey Neistat, Casey is like the OG on YouTube. Have you ever seen his Nike commercial that he did?
I haven't.
You haven't
No,
seen it?
I haven't seen
Oh
it.
my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to tell everyone about it. Casey Neistat, like ages ago, back in the day, back in like the beginning of YouTube, the dawn of time, he made this Nike commercial. And basically, Nike gave him a budget. And instead of making it into, sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Nike gave him a budget. And instead of making it into like a shoe commercial, he took the budget and he ran. You would love this. He ran across the world for as long as the budget would take him. So the video, the commercial,
epic.
the commercial is him running with his friend, and the whole video is just him running from place to place to place, like all over the world until the money ran out and they had to go home. And
Okay, I love that.
it's so cool. I love it.
You know what? Never had a chance to connect him too much. We were, busy just pounding the pavement. But Dan Churchill was the one that invited me out, and Ken Rideout was also there. And if those listeners don't know who Ken Rideout is, he is the world record holder for the fastest marathon over the age of 50. So I believe he's 52 this year, and he clocked a 2:28 marathon, which is incredibly fast. So yeah, we had a pretty fast pace, and there was little talking throughout the run, but it was a joy and privilege to be in their company and go for a tour around Manhattan and New York.
That's a pretty badass run club.
It was, yeah. We had a great group, and we saw the sunrise, and yeah, it was just an epic day out, epic humans all around. It was a good way to get back on the road after Project 125.
So cool. So yeah, let's talk about Opscotch. Tell us about Opscotch. What is Opscotch? How did it come to be?
Yeah. So what I like to say is Opscotch is a modern health company. We give people the tools and knowledge to optimize their health. So we do blood biomarker testing. We have a really focused supplement lineup, and then a community of people to help them in their journey of wellness and optimization. So backtrack 4 years ago, a little background on myself. I'm a lifelong athlete. I used to swim for the Canadian national water polo team. That took me the world in my youth, and I've committed to my health all the way along. I've been an entrepreneur for over about 15 years, I'd say. And 4 years ago, I went through some incredible hard times adversity in business mostly, but that trickled into personal life. And nonetheless, I made the conscious choice to lean into my health at that point in time. I felt, why retreat from it, focus on my health, quit drinking alcohol and just lean heavy into that so I could really navigate those tough waters as best as possible. And when I did that, I engaged with my now business partner, Spencer Coppin, who has been doing longevity medicine for about 15 years at the time, and it was a private practice. We started optimizing everything from my hormones to nutrition to my sleep, and it was transformative. Now, his services were quite costly and it wasn't accessible for many, and mostly high net worth or high profile clients is who he typically works with. And after I had worked with him for about 2 years and then exited my business, I gave it about 6 months and I went back to him and I said, let's democratize what you do. And he's like, what do you mean by that? I said, let's make it more accessible and approachable, and this offer this to people so that they have an opportunity to do what I did and optimize my overall health, from physical health to mental health. And, that translates into emotional health as well.
Brilliant. It's
Hmm.
it's so cool, and I have had the honor of seeing Opscotch through Ryan. So Ryan has been a part of Opscotch for since I've met him, and seeing him take I mean, Ryan is incredible at implementing any advice around his health, and seeing him take the advice from Opscotch and see direct results as a result of in his blood work, like being
Hmm.
able to actually track the metrics and see that what he's doing is working, and it obviously inspired me. I ended up joining
Yeah.
Opscotch. I just did my first blood test, and the whole taking the blood test is so funny. Ryan, I remember the first time I saw him taking his blood test, he like was blasting Eminem because he like didn't want to hear himself do it.
I love it.
So funny. Anyway, I did it like a boss. That little like
Yeah, you
clipper,
did.
yeah, it's so easy. And getting the results back and doing the call was just so awesome because I think it's so important to have an education around what is going on in your
Hmm.
body. And you guys did such an amazing job of explaining every single detail of
Hmm.
every single metric. And then also, like, I feel like there's so much confusion around, like, there's so much health information. We're bombarded with what to do from everybody.
Hmm.
And when you're trying all these different things, it's hard to know what is actually working. But with
Well, and
these
it's not
tests,
personalized either, right?
exactly, exactly.
So, and the way that the healthcare system's set up, in Canada, super grateful for the healthcare system, and it's not designed to take you past what one would consider air quote healthy, right? So if you want to take that next level, you want to optimize your health and be optimal and be on that podium, well, then you got to take agency over your own health, and this is where we help people.
Yeah, I love that you guys, when you were explaining the metrics, you're like, this is like the superhuman.
Hmm.
You want to be in the superhuman
Yeah,
level. And
let's shrink those ranges, right? We're not going to be like the mass. You're not going to be one of 1,000 people your age and demographic.
yeah,
We're going to put you on that podium, get you that gold medal. So we're shrinking the ranges so that you're really in that optimal range. Yeah, for just for the betterment of your health long term.
I love everything about it. I think that empowering people to take control of and even understand their bodies is
Hmm.
so important. And I'm also the biggest Whoop fan now.
Yeah.
I was like so unsure of what wearable to go with. There's so many on the market. I was looking into the Aura Ring, but you guys all suggested the Whoop for the data, the metrics.
Hmm.
And it's interesting just understanding like what affects my sleep. So, like, if I'm snacking at night, my recovery is trash. It's like in the red.
It's
It's
crazy, isn't it?
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had no idea.
There's so many people that I know too that wear a Whoop device, and the times that they go out drinking or have a late night, they take it off, but that defeats the purpose, right? Like, it's just, be informed and see what those certain things do to impact your sleep, and then that'll help you adjust your habits and really learn at the like what the optimal time is to stop drinking or eating food. Um yeah, all the above. What your circadian rhythm is, and how you can capture more restorative sleep, REM and deep sleep. So yeah, it's so fascinating. And once you start using a wearable to your advantage, then you actually feel better in the morning. You're more energized throughout the day, and you can use all that data to your advantage.
Yeah, when you wake up in the 90s, you're like, "Fuck yeah."
Yeah,
Like, it
nailed
feels
it.
so good. It feels so good to look at. Yeah, it's been a cool journey, and, like, I think sleep is, like, so important
hmm
to recovery.
Well, and it's definitely one of those low-hanging fruits that tons of entrepreneurs, overlook, right? They think that we'll work late hours, wake up early mornings, especially juggling a family and what have you. And that is something that you could prioritize at a very low cost. And it's just about like timing your bedtime, what time you go to bed, to ensuring you're capturing that restorative sleep, like I just mentioned. And yeah, for little to no cost.
Consistent sleep time is definitely something that I think is so underrated and also something that is so challenging to commit to. Like, do
Mhm.
you have a consistent sleep routine?
Well, I think you know this by me now. I'm really consistent on many areas of my health. So I have a routine. I try to be very consistent with my bedtime. I'm an early riser, so typically I wake up between 4 and 4:30 a.m.
Wow.
That means that I'd have to go to bed at around 8:30 p.m. And discovering my natural circadian rhythm, which is those times 8:30 to 4:30. Yeah, that's when I get my most restful sleep and my maximize my most restorative hours.
It's cool when you kinda lock that in because it just becomes natural. Like, you're
Mhm.
naturally tired at that time, and you naturally wake up at that time, and it's just getting into the rhythm of doing it consistently for a while, and then your body just, like, takes over.
Exactly. It's the discipline habits with anything, right? And the biggest driver of success, whether it's in business, life, or your health, is consistency.
So, you kinda went on this journey after you hit a rock bottom, and
Mhm.
that's when you kind of moved into the health and wellness through Opscotch. So, previous to that, as an entrepreneur, did you have health and wellness routines, or that was, like, the beginning of it?
So I like to say I'm an extreme human, right? I was born an identical twin, and through my childhood, we were always constantly compared, right? And that means a very like competitive edge, and I saw that all the way through my life. So in my youth, I was super competitive in school. I ended up getting straight A's, graduated at the top of my class, unconditional scholarships across North America, ended up going to university. And even in my university years, I ended up seeing some of my friends not going down the proper path, if you will. And I saw the amount of money that they were making. And that led me astray a bit because being an extreme human and very competitive, I was like, no, I'm going to be able to do what they're doing and amplify that. And, I'll do that times two or three. And nonetheless, it took me astray in my university years. I was making an income alternate ways. And then when I realized that I was going down a path that wasn't aligned with my values, those values that were instilled in me through my family and my upbringing, then immediately I took a like self inventory and quit that and got into entrepreneurship. And when I ventured into entrepreneurship, it was something that I really yeah, embraced that flexibility of being like that creative, like creating something is something that I'm really passionate about. And so yeah, that led me into my entrepreneur journey for over a decade. And yeah, it has its ups and downs, and you learn as you go sometimes. And someone once told me that you can never teach experience. And, going through those hard years in business really teaches you a lot for your next venture.
What are some of the biggest lessons you learned throughout the businesses that you've created, launched?
Yeah, I think, if I could give one big takeaway for any listeners is the tough times will come to an end, you know, and to really try to focus on what you can control. And that's how you show up. So if you can show up in a very pragmatic way, going through resilience, resilient leader has, some very distinct qualities: decisive decision making, being optimistic about the outcome, and really strong communication skills. And if you can focus on those three things, then I think that you'll get through that adversity, at least in the best way possible under the circumstance.
How do you manage when you're like stuck in the thick of it? Like how like creating the bigger vision, like what propels you to not quit?
Mhm. Well, if it's adversity that we're talking about, I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask for help, right? I think that's a big lesson. While I was going through the thick of it, I relied on a couple people who were in my corner, and they're waiting there to catch you and help you, right? And if you don't put up your hand and say that you're drowning, then people won't come and help out. So I think just having the courage to ask for help in times of need, so that you can actually take a step back from the business, let's say, and see the bigger picture of things and can actually gauge the room figuratively. It'll help you see things a lot more clearly, and you'll have that support, whether it's, seeing the business in a different way, making stronger decisions, or just having that emotional support on that outside of things. Yeah, it's imperative.
So for the people that are just starting out, like how do you create that support network?
That's a great question. For me personally, I put myself out there. I joined different communities. There's a lot of like entrepreneur communities nowadays. There's women's led communities, there's men's groups. I think right now we're at this peak of like, access to communities. So I think strongly encourage people to put themselves out there, especially post pandemic. Like there's so many opportunities to network and build relationships. And I think, don't overlook that. And, you never know when you need those relationships in times of need and difficulties. And yeah, just plant the seed now.
So I feel like as entrepreneurs, we have a million ideas. I'm sure you've also had a million ideas. How do you know which ideas to move forward with and actually like take action on?
Oh, as one that has like this visionary personality, there's tons of ideas. A lot of them end up in the graveyard. But I would say the ones that really have, translated into success, and success can be defined in many ways, but the one that is the most fulfilling is finding the ones that are aligned with your passion, right? Because you know what? We are only on this earth once. We've been given this opportunity. And there's countless times that I've been in an industry that really didn't ignite me, and finding what your deep down passion is and what you were put on this earth to do is something that should be explored, right? And there's nothing wrong in your 20s and your, even early 30s to try things. Like that's when you can, try things and fail and learn, right? Fail quick, as they say, and get back up and learn from your mistakes and continue growing. And if you do that in your early days, outside of university or outside of, post-secondary education or what have you, then you can really understand a little bit about yourself and what ignites you and, find your path.
I feel like there's like definitely a struggle in entrepreneurship in every business. And like, how do you know when it's worth pushing forward and when it's ready to like quit, shut it
hmm
down?
Yeah, this is a struggle I think that everyone faces one day or another, including myself, and perhaps right now as well in other areas of my life. Someone once told me about like the sunk cost bias, and just really, a lot of us get attached to either the investment of time, the investment of money into something. It could be a relationship, it could be a business. And to really take inventory on where you're at today. So aside from that investment over, a period of time, whether it's a couple months, a couple years, a decade, for instance, just look at where you're at today. And one thing I ask myself is, if I were to start from a fresh plate today, would I go forward with this decision? And if you can just take a, pause and understand where you're at aside from the history, I think that's the best approach.
I agree with that a million percent. I think it's so easy to cling to things that are no longer working,
No longer serving us.
no longer serving us. And it's like it takes taking that moment to pause and reflect and understand how you actually feel in this moment
hmm
and if it's still aligned or not.
Hmm.
And like it can be so hard to choose a new path when you're in something, and feeling aligned is the greatest feeling on earth. And that's where you're going to have the success. When you're feeling aligned, you become magnetic and things
Hmm.
actually work. And when things are not working and you're living in an unpreferred reality, it's a sign and it's a gift to show you that you need to move into a new direction.
100%. And you know what? Sometimes it's even hard to recognize this in certain times. What I found, and we'll get into it during Project 125, I really had to ramp up my running and long distance training. And that meant long runs. And that was operating in a complete silo. um you know Going inward, 5 6 hour long runs, reflecting, understanding a lot about myself. And this was an opportunity for me to understand what in my life is serving me right now and what isn't. And it's a season for shedding things, and really evolving and growing from that, and just taking those lessons and being grateful for the things from the past and how they served us at one point, but they might not serve us now in the future.
So I feel like we've done a lot of foreshadowing to
Mhm.
Project 125. What is the project, and tell us about what that experience was like?
Yeah. So Project 125, back in March, a university friend hadn't talked to for over 20 years, Krista Gloyan. She's a two-time Olympian, Olympic silver medalist, and a mother of two. She has a 4 and 6 year old. I saw on Facebook that she had dislocated her shoulder by opening a jar of pickles. She went to the hospital. She got some scans done, and the doctor came back and said, "You didn't dislocate your shoulder, you broke your arm." And after further scans, they understood that she now was succumbed to stage 4 cancer and 6 lesions from her head to her waist. And yeah, her sister put up a GoFundMe for $5,000 that week to raise money for, further treatments and scans. I'll fast forward a little bit. Essentially, I heard the call, and, working with Krista and her sisters and her family, understood that if they wanted to raise money for some leading edge treatment for Krista, um, down in Florida, that there would be a significant fundraise required. And the only way that we'd be able to do that is to inspire others to support someone who truly inspired us. Right. And I came up with the idea to run from Vancouver to Whistler, which is 125 kilometers, 1,900 meters of elevation. So that's like close to 9,000 feet. And I took the plunge. And when I made the decision to do that, Krista and one of her sisters were down in Florida. She had already received one of the treatments, which cost $75,000 US
Wow.
approximately. And I asked how much we had to raise. And they came back and said 125 grand. And I said, "Well, that's fascinating because I have to run 125 kilometers." The very next day, while they were down in Florida, I called them and said, "Let's do this. I'll run Vancouver to Whistler." And as I pulled into a coffee shop, I Googled how many days out it was on the date that we agreed upon, and it was 125 days.
Stop it.
Yeah. So the
That is
universe,
so
yeah.
serendipitous.
So that's what led us to call it Project 125.
So what inspired you to choose to run from Vancouver to Whistler? Like where did that idea come from?
Yeah. So those listeners that are unaware, there's a very infamous cycling race that's called the RBC Gran Fondo. It's the 15th year this year, and it's exactly that route. It's from Vancouver to Whistler. It's daunting. There's pro riders that come in from all over the world. It's North America's largest cycling race. There's upwards of 10,000 cyclists every year. And that's what inspired me to think about doing that as a run. I told myself that in order to inspire other people to support Krista, I would have to push my physical and my mental like ceiling. And this is something that would do that. The irony of all this is after committing to, this run and working with Krista and her sisters to put this together, it was about a couple weeks in, and the CEO of the RBC Gran Fondo called me. It was Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. He says, "Hey, this is Neil," and shared with me that our story landed on his desk at 5:30 in the morning, and he was so compelled by it. He was, really moved by the whole story. Has all the time in the world for Olympians, women in sport. It was heartbreaking, and Krista's sister, Leah, was the very first RBC Gran Fondo winner.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a pro cyclist, and she still maintains the women's record for the fastest time after 15 years.
What an awesome set of sisters.
Yeah, yeah, they're just athletes through and through. And he put it out there and asked me if I wanted to be the first ever and sole runner of their event. And this would mean moving our training up by an additional 2 weeks. So I would have to embark on it on September 6th. And yeah, we were head over heels that they would be supportive of this and help elevate the story and really help us with that initiative and getting more exposure.
How did it feel receiving that call?
It was humbling. It was incredibly humbling. He mapped it out for me too that they get asked to partner 3 times a week, every week of the year. They sadly always have to say no. They have huge sponsors from RBC to Strava to other sponsors, and there was no way that they can ever deviate from their cause. It's a well-oiled machine now. Like I said, there's pro riders that fly in from all over the world to compete in this, and when he offered me the opportunity to be the first ever runner, it was not only humbling but exciting. And then I felt like the pressure was on because it was a really, really short window for me to ramp up my training to execute something like this.
So, what did the training look like to make this happen?
Yeah. So some people fall off their chair when I share this. I'm not a runner. So I've only run one marathon, and that was 14 years ago. I did the 2011 Berlin Marathon, and that was the last time that I did like a 10K even. So yeah, sure, I can throw in the runners and I can do, a couple kilometers here and there. But as, a timed run, I haven't run for well over a decade. And so when I had this calling and this commitment to do this, it was something that I knew that I would have to ramp up really, really quick. And absent of having a runner's foundation, I knew that I'd have to put in the miles.
I'm in shock. Like, how did you know that you could actually do this?
There was something within me that I knew that, like, as an extreme human, like I said, that as soon as it came out of my mouth, there was no doubt in my mind that I'd get this done. And, of course, as a lifelong athlete, I knew somewhat of my capacity. I knew my mental fortitude to get it done. And that was more than half of it. And I knew that I have very consistent habits. I'm very competitive, like I said. And I was out there to do it not only for Krista, but I recognized about 10 days after committing that this was a redemption run for me. This is something that I knew that I needed to do for myself. After going through all that adversity 4 years ago, when you really don't have control over everything, you don't have control over the industry, you don't have control over shareholders, many other business constraints. But for this, I had full control. I had full control about my commitment to this cause and this commitment to myself. And I knew that if I could redeem myself, it would be another level of like confidence and self worth on the other side. So there was no question that some of this parlayed into me proving to myself that I could accomplish anything I put my mind to.
And you did it. What was the training schedule like for this?
Yeah. So, we had less than 125 days. As I said, I committed to it 125 days out, but we had to move that forward by 2 weeks. So it was about 100 days of training. Typically in a marathon training, you need 6 months or up to a year to really lay the foundation. And this was an ultra. So this was over 3 marathons and uphill. So nonetheless, I had to forego some key components of a typical training plan. Now, in a marathon or ultra plan, you would do long distance runs every week. You'd also incorporate some pacing runs, some hill runs, and you do some interval training, right? And because it just would be too much pounding on my legs, because I didn't have that foundation, then all I focus on is getting in the long distance miles. So I specifically focused on stacking 2 long distance runs back to back. So for instance, on a Saturday, I would go out and it ended up being like a marathon, like 43 kilometers, 26 miles. And then the following day, I would do another 35 kilometers. And then the following week, I would ramp it up by like 15% week over week. So at my peak, which was about 3 weeks out of the run, I peaked with 54 kilometers on the Saturday and an additional 48 kilometers on the Sunday. So those are two well over marathons back to back, and I was doing this week in, week out for many weeks.
So how are you managing your, like, recovery, your food? Like, what did your actual training regimen look like in terms of, like, your health, wellness, well-being, mindset?
Mhm. Yeah, so, you know, my habits and my consistency, many people are like, "How did you do this in such a short window?" Well, the training, air quote, started 4 years ago, right? I knew that I was in peak performance. I knew where I was with my health right now, and, when I heard the call, I knew that I could take that leap of faith because I was in an optimal state, right? And this goes back to Opscotch, right? Um, basically putting yourself out there, like setting yourself up for success, the training started a long time ago. So I just had to transfer those habits into this program and just, adjust things a little bit. I had to increase my nutrition. I was burning a lot of calories for this additional long distance running. I had to lay off things during the week, prioritize some more recovery, right? Some more rolling, all those like tight hips and legs, right? That was something that was foreign to me. But I still maintained my strength training. Strength was a big reason why I could commit to something like this, and it wasn't, forced with any kind of injuries. I also prioritized. I was super grateful. There's a company now is across North America called Myo Detox. They came on as a partner. So I was seeing an RMT every 2 weeks. Super grateful for them. They allowed me to move pain free throughout the training program. Yeah. And I wouldn't be able to ramp it up as much as I did without their support.
So I'm sure you weren't able to just, like, completely pause your business for 125 days. So how did you manage, like, the job that you have? Like, how did you manage managing Opscotch and doing this at the same time?
Because health has always been a priority and because my training has also always been, part of my schedule, it was more of an adjustment, right? So what kind of training am I going to do? Yeah, sure. We added, several more hours during the week into my training program, but that was like, how can I fit it in and prioritize things? So, everyone has the time. I'm a firm believer in that. It's about managing our schedules and just figuring out what works for us, right? And so I was finding myself getting up at 3:30 in the morning and just getting in that extra hour of training. So most of my runs, even though they were 5 to 6 hours long, they were all done before 10 a.m. So, just managing my schedule, prioritizing different things than I'm used to, and making those subtle adjustments and then, getting it done.
I'm just laughing at anyone that says that they don't have time to work out, and Maddie's doing a 6-hour run before work. That's
I know, I
insane.
know, I know. It's just, I knew it's the only way to manage everything throughout for the couple months that I had. So,
So, like, having schedules and systems are definitely very important to you?
yeah. Yeah, definitely when it comes to my health, for
Yeah.
sure. And there was a little bit of the untold story of Project 125. There was a lot of personal turbulence, from a physical standpoint to a mental and spiritual standpoint, and I was doing this in a silo, right? I'm not a runner, so I don't have a running community. So, me being able to understand, when I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling the pain or I'm feeling a little sluggish, and making that commitment to myself to continue to get to the start line. I have this mantra that's be the fuel, right? And that can you resonate with people in different ways. What it means to me is be that fuel of transformation, be that fuel of support, be that fuel for others. Um, and every morning I woke up, and when there was any kind of, friction or, resistance about pursuing this goal for that day, it was like, what am I going to fuel today? Who am I doing this for? Am I doing it for myself? Am I doing it for Krista? Am I doing it to inspire other people to have an impact? So it was about being the fuel, um, yeah, throughout. And so that's the mantra that got me through some of the turbulence that I was faced. And yeah, I just continued one step after the other, moving forward to our goal.
One of the questions I was going to ask you was if you had an affirmation or a mantra, because I totally agree that you need to have a why and you need to be reminded of that why
Hmm.
because it's so easy to let the day's wait kind of take you off course from the ultimate goal. But
Hmm.
when you have that mantra and you know why you're doing something, it makes it easy to continue.
Yeah. And circling back to that like big why that I only uncovered as I was doing these long runs, I had an opportunity to really sit with myself and go inward and really like self-discovery and understanding that this was a redemption run. There was no doubt in my mind that would not get done. And that meant every single training session throughout the weeks or the end goal, keeping that end goal in mind. And when I had the opportunity and was invited to be the sole and first ever runner of the RBC Gran Fondo, there was that vision that I always had. And I could see myself cross that finish line and in Whistler, BC, iconic route. And that I never lost sight of. So
So let's talk about the actual run. You ran for 18 hours straight.
it was an incredible and experience, of course, incredibly daunting. Um, the one thing that I should share is that the RBC Gran Fondo, the cycling race, it starts at 7 a.m. and this year it was on September 7th on the Saturday. And because I was asked to be the runner, I had to finish 15 minutes prior to the pro cyclist crossing the finish line.
So if you weren't fast enough, you would get run
I'd
over.
get taken off the course. Yeah. They literally said they would take me off the course if I did not cross within a 15-minute window. So because the pro cyclist would cross the finish in Whistler at 9:50 a.m. on the Saturday, we had to reverse and engineer the math to know what my pacing would be to get to the finish at precisely 9:30 a.m. And so we backed it out. And this was a, roll of the dice, right? I had never run this distance. I had never run this course. I had no idea how long it was going to take me. Not to mention, we're talking about running through the night. I had not done no nighttime runs. So energetically, I didn't know where that would sit either. So we with working with the Canadian Sport Institute, understanding what the most efficient pace would be, we backed it out and we believed that I would need to leave at 2 p.m. on the Friday to get through the night to cross at the finish at precisely 9:30 a.m. on the Saturday.
What time did you cross the finish line?
So, in good old fashioned Matty fashion, I showed up early. Yeah, I showed up early and we got there. We were about ten minutes out of the finish line and there was some timing that we had to coordinate with the RBC Gran Fondo. And they have another small little cycling race called the Medio, which departs Whistler. It's a 55K loop, departs Whistler at precisely 9:20. So the reason why I had to cross at 9:30 is because I had to wait for those riders to pass through. I would thread the needle before the pro riders coming in from Vancouver. Well, when I showed up and it was like 8:45, we were getting phone calls from from the finish line being like, let's get them through, let's get them through. And so we had to amp it up and I had to like really dig deep those last 2 kilometers. And we crossed at 8:55 a.m. before the Medio even left the gates.
It's honestly mind-boggling. It's crazy. It's hard to even comprehend. Like, what were you thinking about while you were doing this run?
Yeah, once first I leave Vancouver at 2 p.m. and you get the first marathon underneath the belt, right? So that was around 8:30 p.m. I've run 48 kilometers, so like 5 kilometers over a marathon, and things started getting dark. Okay. First marathon wasn't hard, but now I'm faced with complete darkness, which actually was a big oversight, Autumn. I underestimated how dark it would get. I thought there was going to be street lamps. There was no street lamps,
Yeah,
right?
in the
There,
middle of the
there was
mountains.
none,
Yeah.
right? So I'm running in complete darkness solo. One of my friends actually flew in from Virginia. She's an Ironman athlete, done several Ironmans. She's done long distance running. She's done through the night. But she reminded me that this was going to be a solo adventure. I'm not going to be able to feed off any energy of any pacers, of any other racers. There was no checkpoints, none of that. So I was in my head for majority of the way. And when it started getting dark at 8:30, 9 p.m., that's when there was a lot of hills and there's a lot of climbing. And now I'm venturing into a territory that I hadn't got into, right? Like from a distance standpoint. So 54 kilometers was my longest distance in my training. And, 60 kilometers I may do, 7 kilometers may do. But when I hit that 80-kilometer mark, we're talking, in the early hours of the morning on Saturday, really early. And yeah, it was about digging deep. And one big reminder that I had, which I think translates into life, is just keep moving forward. That's it. Just keep moving forward. It was reminded me by the Canadian Sport Institute. So, those that don't know, Canadian Sport Institute is a high performance environment for our Olympic athletes. Most of our Olympians work with them. It's for physiological testing, for nutrition support, for mental support. I was super grateful they came on board to support me in this endeavor. And one of the guys reminded me on their team that if I want to be efficient, just keep moving my body forward towards the destination. Because even if I have to walk for an hour throughout the whole night, that's still an additional 5K towards my goal. So don't walk in circles, don't pause, just keep walking. And I just had that mindset. So even if things started to feel a little tight, I'm feeling a little bit of pain, physically, mentally, all of it, then I can just walk. I can walk, take those 10 steps, take those 20 steps, and just keep moving forward in the same, towards the destination and our finish line. And that'll get me there.
I feel like that's a good method for life too. It's not don't quit, it's just take a break or rest, slow down, start walking. You don't
Mhm.
have to just quit and give up. Um so Ryan mentioned you had a pretty badass playlist that was a part of the journey too.
Yeah. This is where community played a big role, right? And hey, look, I can't take the credit. Someone suggested I do this, and it was the most beautiful suggestion. One of the highlights. So I put it out to on social. I put it out to my community, and I asked everyone to, provide me those that wanted to participate. It was an invitation to provide me a song that either one inspires and motivates them in the gym, to throw down, if you will, or a song that reminds them of me. And
Aw.
yeah, it was incredibly powerful. I ended up getting 98 songs. It was over 7 hours of straight playlist, and everyone has either submitted one or two songs. I think it was across I got 98 songs across around 82 people, and every single time one of those songs came on, I knew exactly who it came from, and that motivated me in the moment. So, every 3 or 4 minutes, it would be someone else on my top of mind, and that would get me through those next couple minutes. And it was just such a beautiful way to like remind yourself of like who you're doing this for and like being that fuel for others and inspiring others along the way.
That is a brilliant idea. And like so did you train with this playlist beforehand
I
and then
I did a little bit. I did a
yeah.
little bit, yeah, because as I was collecting it was a couple weeks out. So, yeah, there were some people that wanted to give like 7 songs. I'm like, "Listen, okay, if you give me 7, I won't remember any of the ones that you give me. So just give me 1 or 2." And it was just, yeah, like I said, it was just a beautiful way. And, even, through these turbulent times while I'm training, it was like so like empowering and like, filling yourself with love, right? Like all these people that took time to send me a song. Yeah, just such a reminder that there's so many people in our lives that might not come top of mind every single day, but they're there. They're there waiting to support you.
I'm obsessed and I love music and I feel like that is just like a beautiful gift. I would love to share it with the community. Can we share the
Yeah, for
link?
sure.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
cool.
and you know what's so cool? It ranges from like rock to rap to classical, like symphony and like tribal. So it was just an array of beautiful music, and yeah, be an honor to share it with the community.
What would you say was like the most challenging part of the run? Like was there a period of time that you were like, I don't know if I can finish this or did you know the whole time that it was happening no matter what? Like
Yeah, you know what? Those closest to me who know me and my personality, they knew that there was no question that I was going to finish it. And as did I, right? But it wasn't a matter of if, nor was it a matter of when, because we only had a finite time that we had no choice in the matter, but it was how. How was I going to get this done? What was I going to look like at the end of the run, right? You know, how many breaks would I have to take, right? I would say the most challenging point in the run was around like the 105-kilometer mark. So if I were to backtrack, I think that was around 5:30 in the morning. The sun had just come up, and it was really reminded by several people that that course from Vancouver to Whistler, that last 20K is a long like, surprising grind of hills. And, people forget about it. Those that are racing the cycling race, the RBC Gran Fondo, that's an area where a lot of cyclists actually bonk. They hit a
Mm.
wall. So they think they're on their home stretch. They're all excited. They have like some euphoria, there's some adrenaline going, and they completely hit a wall because there's an oversight of the hills that are remaining. So I was very mindful of that going in, and that's when it was a little bit of a struggle bus. I was feeling the pain. I was in territory of distance that I'd never done. I was just coming through the night, but the finish wasn't in that distance that I could taste it yet. It was still like 20K to go, right? I remember it vividly. And Autumn, if I may share, there was one point when people reflected after the fact and they're like, yeah, you were struggling. And my support vehicle was there with me with some key people in it. And St. Elmo's fire came on. And I don't know what overcome me. It was like Phoenix rising, as people, shared with me. And my shoulders went back, my chest went up, and I literally saw new hope. And that song just like pushed me. And next thing you know, I was running like I had just left the start line. And it was for about 8K that I just kept going, and it was seamless. All the pain was gone. Any kind of like, imbalances were gone. I was running super efficient. I was looking good, feeling good. And after I ran that 8K, I'm like 114K like into the run. I stopped, and the support vehicle caught up with me, and there was an ICU doctor in our support vehicle, Dr. Kanji, and he looks at me and goes, "I've seen a lot of things in the ICU. I've never seen something like that." And that had me moved. And he was in tears. And there was other people in the vehicle as well. And there was just this like overcoming of like resilience to get the job done. And yeah, I think it's a testament to who I had around me and this relentless focus that I had, and just knowing in myself and this unwavering self belief that I would see myself through that finish.
And so tell me about seeing the finish line and like what was that experience like?
Well, this is quite funny. I haven't shared this on a podcast or anything. So, it was 125 kilometers, and we got to a certain point, and RBC Gran Fondo was radioing us about what time we were going to finish. Where is he at? All these things, these logistics things as we're approaching the finish line. And we had to be very precise with what time we were crossing. And my support vehicle, uh, they had shared with me that we were 5.1 kilometers out. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I'm like, we're like 2.1. And they're like, no, we're 5.1. I'm like, there's no effing way. Like, I'm looking at my watch. I know where we are. I know where we are, like, as we approach Whistler. And I was adamant. And there was something that overcame me. I was very respectful still, of course, but this is my thing. This is my thing. I'm the boss here. I'm owning this, and I'm getting through this finish. And I threw my water bottle. I'm like, there's no effing way. We got 2 kilometers. And the thing is, Autumn, is that this was a big deal because I'm pacing like 7-minute kilometers. So the difference of 3 kilometers is massive as we're trying to thread this needle of when I'm gonna finish, right? And sure enough, it was 2.1 kilometers. And that's what led us to finishing at 8:55.
That must
showing
have
up
felt
early.
good.
It felt good, and I owned it, and I knew what I had in my tank too, right? Like, energetically in my body, I knew what I had, and I was gonna crush those last 2 kilometers like a champ. And when I crossed that finish line, it was a glorious moment. I felt like I had just left, and everything came over me as I crossed. Krista, our recipient, the two-time Olympian, my dear friend, she was there. I ran across, I leaped into her arms. I remember looking at her and being like, "We did this. We did it." She's like, "You did it." I'm like, "No, no, no. We did it. We
That
did
is
it."
incredible.
Yeah.
Like, how are you ever gonna top that? Like,
I
that
know.
feeling is
Yeah,
insane.
it was insane, and I was sitting at the finish line, and they did an interview for me, and then there was a lot of pictures, and I have kudos to all those that are succumbed to paparazzi and pictures because maybe it's because I was exhausted, 18 hours, no sleep, yeah, but I was spent, right? I was spent, and I remember sitting down and just reflecting, and just what a moment, and just super grateful for everyone supporting along the way. Um, it was the most momentous point in my life. And one thing that I always love sharing when people ask me about what the most surprising part of the run was, it was without hesitation the amount of people that it impacted and the amount of people that it touched and moved. I was overwhelmed with comments, inbound, just notes, messages. There was like over 650 messages that I received, just telling me how incredibly moved and inspired and motivated they were. And it's truly humbling, and it's just an honor that I had the opportunity to do that and share that experience with so many people along the way.
The video was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, kudos to Ryan. Love that guy. He came along, flew in from Toronto, captured the whole thing, basically had footage from start to finish of the run. And yeah, just being able to share that with the world and just a glimpse to the magic of everything that was put together to make that happen. I'm immensely grateful that we could share that.
Yeah, it's incredible to be able to see the journey happening. Like, there's literally footage of you running through the night, getting your toes fixed up
Oh
on
yeah.
the
The maple syrup and all the fuel along the way, eating anything I could even think of to
Yeah,
get those simple carbs in. But yeah, it was pretty special.
because it's hard to believe, but then actually seeing the video, you're like, "Wow, that actually happened."
Yeah, yeah.
So, how much money did you raise?
So we had a goal. Like I said, Project 125, it was to raise run 125 kilometers in 125 days to raise 125,000 collectively across a couple other initiatives, primarily Project 125. We ended up raising $130,000.
Always just a little bit
Just a
more.
little bit more.
That's
Showing up a
awesome.
little early, raising a little bit more, but yeah, we hit our goal, and couldn't have done it with everyone's support collectively. Krista's sisters were a big element of that, and yeah, my community, they really stepped up across North America. You know, I had so many people donating. Didn't even know who Krista was personally, and they just saw the bigger picture and the impact that we could have in someone's life, and just yeah, the generosity was there, and super grateful.
So, what's next for Project 125?
It's a little bit early to tell. I'm embracing the moment, cherishing what we accomplished. But if I were to forecast what we could do in the future, one thing that we could do is repeat this event and scale it to another level.
What does your next season look like?
This is definitely a season of self-love, right? A newfound confidence, right? I just really believe that this has unlocked something very magical for me. Just understanding that if I put my mind to anything, I can accomplish it. When we set out to do Project 125, I knew that we weren't dreaming of the impossible, but we were definitely dreaming of the improbable. And it was the commitment to self and the support that I had from community that made it possible. And there is nothing that can hold me back or any of the listeners other than our minds. And this Project 125 was the epitome of that, right? Is that we dreamt it and we did it. And I know that going forward, it's this newfound belief in myself that anything can be achieved.
Do you have any tips for anyone listening about cultivating that level of self-trust?
I think the biggest thing is about taking action, right? When we delay and procrastinate with anything, we open up a gap, and that dwindles our self-confidence. So I think even taking action, even if you don't get the outcome that you want, just taking that action, taking that leap, committing to something bigger than ourselves, that's when we can instill and build confidence. And then it's this flywheel that we continue to build within ourselves. And it unlocks something truly special in all of us.
Messy action is the definition of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, you have to get out of your head and you have to start putting pen to paper and making things happen. And it's cool that you've applied that to your entrepreneurial journeys, but also to this project.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It just never been a man of religion. Having said that, spirituality is a big part of my life. And God blesses your actions though, right? And just taking those actions, you don't know what the ripple effect will have in not only your life, but in so many other people's lives.
Thank you so much for chatting today. This was so inspiring. I am so excited to see what's next for you. And it was so great to hear about your story.
Hey, this has been awesome. Thanks for having me, Autumn. And I can't wait to come back on the next part of my journey.
Yeah, for 100%. I'll definitely have you back.
Okay, awesome.
Where can we find you online?
Okay. Well, my Instagram handle is at Matty_Christopherson. At Opscotching is another handle on IG. And then opscotch.com is our website.
Amazing. I'll put everything in the show notes so you can connect with Matty. Thanks again for coming.
Awesome.
This is great.
Bye.
Yay. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Seasons Podcast. We release new episodes every Wednesday. See you next week.